The film is named The Final Reckoning, but is it the finale of a 30-year-old action franchise? Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning is the latest addition to the long-running Tom Cruise franchise, pun intended, and the continuation of the story of Part 7 Dead Reckoning, with the marketing and the name of the film implying that this might be the final chapter in the story of Ethan Hunt and his impossible missions. Whether or not it's the final installment is something that we'll discuss later on in this video, but let us discuss the several aspects of the film which I liked and did not like. There are pretty evident pacing issues in the first 20 minutes of the film. There are abrupt location jumps, abrupt appearances of characters, which really made me feel as if there was supposed to be a scene explaining how they got there and what they're doing there, but it's missing. Ethan and Grace are later kidnapped and Ethan bluffs about committing suicide, and because of the abrupt pacing of the first 20 minutes of the film, all of this feels like a dream sequence rather than a coherent story. But fortunately, the pacing issue exists only in the 20 minutes of the film, and then the film becomes much more coherent. During the opening scene, we get several montages and flashbacks to previous Mission Impossible films, which definitely gives us the impression that we are actually watching the last movie of a franchise, and Ethan Hunt might not make it out of this film alive. Gabriel threatens to get the information out of Ethan by torturing Grace in front of him, and Ethan promises her that he would not let anything happen to her. This is something that I have talked about in my review of Dead Reckoning as well, that Grace is a good character on her own. Sudden care that Ethan has for her feels rather abrupt and forced. Dude, she tried to kill you in the last film. I talk about the pacing of the film. Up until the death scene of Luther, the film feels like a fever dream. And once again, there is that element of stupidity that the antagonist gets his hands on a piece of technology that Ethan needs for his mission in this film, by sheer convenience. Luther is the only major character in this film that dies, but again, his death does not occur during the main mission. His death is quite important to the plot of the story, as Luther is the only one who can make that poison key, and it does not exist just to motivate Ethan. As we know that the threat of the entity from the 7th film is continued in this film as well, but the plan Ethan and team come up with in order to save the world is rather complicated, convoluted, and only works when a lot of different independent elements work together. The film itself calls out the astronomical odds of this plan working, but just because the film calls this out with dialogue does not mean that it is convenient writing. The plan is more likely to fail than succeed, but again, movies are larger than life realities in which the impossible happens. The plan itself is not a bad one, just too over the top and complicated to be comprehended with ease. At one point in the film, I just gave up trying to understand their plan and went along for the ride. And this is only possible because the film gets intense and hooks us in. The entity as a threat is great on paper, but again, it gets too complicated for its own good. Gabriel, on the other hand, is not a worthy opponent for Ethan Hunt. Come on, we had Henry Cavill as the antagonist of the 6th one. At least match that if you cannot top that. There is megalophobia, fear of large objects. There is thalassophobia, fear of sea. And then there is claustrophobia, fear of tight, closed spaces. I have the first two, and claustrophobia is a common experience throughout the world. The entire submarine sequence gave me severe anxiety as I watched it in the theater. And that is a good thing. Ethan going into the deep sea, then inside that big submarine, then inside the torpedo vent of the said submarine, and boy oh boy, the whole sequence was sheer anxiety. A major reason that sequence worked so well is that we never cut from that scene to a different set of characters or a different scene. We as an audience follow Ethan inside the submarine as he tries to retrieve the Podkova, while the submarine is shifting inside the ocean and is on the brink of falling in deeper into the sea. Those were some of the most anxiety-inducing 20 minutes of the entire franchise. The diving sequence from the 5th film, the Burj Khalifa sequence from the 4th film, or the final helicopter sequence from the 6th film are more on the thrilling side, but this one was a slow build-up of anxiety. One of the first few promotional videos that we saw of Mission Impossible 8 was that of Tom Cruise standing on top of a flying plane and addressing the audience directly.
And action! Let's see the movie.
The final sequence of this film is absolutely thrilling, one-upping the opening scene of Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. Tom Cruise hanging on for dear life while also trying to tackle Gabriel was quite a thrilling experience. But to me personally, this was slightly less thrilling than the final sequence of Mission Impossible Fallout. Gabriel taunts Ethan that only one of them has a parachute, then conveniently Ethan finds another parachute in that plane. That's just poor writing. The way this scene and the entire film builds up made me feel that Ethan might make a Captain America type sacrifice at the end of the film, destroying both the drive and himself by crashing the plane and bringing the entire franchise to an end. But that's not how things turned out. Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol ends with a tease of a syndicate which is further explored in Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. Dead Reckoning had part 1 in the title itself, so we knew that there will be a sequel to this film. All the other Mission Impossible films, including this one, end without a tease for a next one or a cliffhanger. But because in the past we have had Mission Impossible sequels without any tease or cliffhanger before, the ending of this film does not feel final. Sure, it concludes the story that started in the 7th film, but Ethan and his team make it out of the film unharmed. So the film does not feel as final as I would have liked. Mission Impossible is probably the only large-scale action franchise which is neither bonkers like the Fast and Furious films, nor does it rely on heavy CGI like Marvel or DC. Tom Cruise risks his life for every film, keeping the spirit of cinema and filmmaking alive. With Ethan and team surviving this film, I will not be surprised if a few years down the line we have Mission Impossible 9. Killing off Ethan Hunt, or at least implying that he died at the end of the film, would have been a more emotional send-off to the franchise. Is this the final Mission Impossible film? Only time will tell. Mission Impossible films have several tropes: high-octane chase sequences, face masks, hand-to-hand fight scenes, Tom Cruise risking his life for our entertainment. But because the Final Reckoning has such a grand story to tell us, we miss out on several of them. The fight scenes in this film are great, but they end too soon. We do have two sequences of Ethan Hunt defying all odds and pulling off something insane. For example, the submarine sequence. But we don't have a big chase scene in this film. We have a mask off scene at the beginning, but it's too quick, which I don't mind because I'm not really a big fan of that trope. But if this is the last film of the franchise, I would have been really happy with at least one cool scene in which a random character does something great and it is revealed that it was Ethan Hunt all along. The film brings back and calls back to several characters from the earlier Mission Impossible films. William Dondo was one such minor character from the first film that is brought back into this film. Briggs, being the son of the antagonist of the first film, was a nice connection. Hence, I think that they should have brought Jeremy Renner's character and Paula Patton's character from Ghost Protocol back in this film. Alas, we don't get that. I know Jeremy Renner has had an accident, so maybe he was not available for shooting, but I would have liked had he been a part of this film as well. Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning is a slow but intense action thriller with some really good sequences, but overall has a complicated series of events. The threat of the entity seems quite real when seen in the context of our reality, in which the technology is evolving at a breakneck pace. But the fact that this film, just like the 4th and the 6th films, comes close to a nuclear war, it's bound to feel a little repetitive. But again, when Tom Cruise tells you to trust him one last time, you trust him and go watch this film in the theater.
I need you to trust me one last time.